hidden gem list. It's something that I haven't really made because, quite frankly, what's a hidden gem? Is it a game that reviewed well but sold poorly? Is it a game that maybe didn't review particularly well but has stood up with the test of time and is actually a fun game? You know, can a game made by Rare or with Mario in it really be seen as a hidden gem? There's too many ways to identify it, what this could be. Yeah, and also someone's hidden gem that they've never heard of may have been a game that someone's owned for 20 years and played many times over. So the whole thing is very subjective. But what I wanted to do was make a list of 15 games for the Nintendo 64 that are great that you may have missed back in the day. Let's get going. Kicking off the list, we have Iggy's Wrecking Balls. Now, this game is a sort of momentum-based game, something a cross between, say, Super Monkey Ball, a racing game, and a platformer. You effectively roll around scaling towers with a grappling hook in order to move up the tower. Now, there's a ton of courses on this, and this game, I think, it received mixed reviews, but I think part of the reason it has stood up pretty well is just that uniqueness and that concept that is so different that makes this fun to play. So if you missed this one in 1998 because you were playing Zelda or Banjo-Kazooie, this is definitely one that you should take a look at. Donald Duck's Quack Attack, or Donald Duck Going Quackers, depending on where you live, is a really simple but incredibly fun platformer, more along the lines of, say, Crash Bandicoot, where the levels are a lot more linear than, say, a Mario 64. I think just due to the fantastic breadth of platformers on Nintendo's platform, this is why this one got left behind a bit. But actually, it's a lot of fun. It's a joy to play. It was overlooked. It's hard to believe that the most famous duck on the planet would have a game that was overlooked, especially on the back of the fantastic Mega Drive games. But this one is something that if you haven't tried it and you like platformers, definitely give this one a look at number 14. At number 13, we have Banjo-Kazooie or Bangai-O. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. This is a 2D shooter game which sadly, and the reason so many people miss this, it was only released in Japan. And that is a massive shame because the game is tons of fun. It did get a European release on the Dreamcast, but if you have an N64 and you do manage to find this one, it's definitely a little hidden gem on the console that didn't get the recognition that I think it deserved from the gameplay. At number 12 is a really, really interesting game, Hybrid Heaven from Konami. Why is it so interesting? Well, it's part RPG, part action-adventure, and I thought it was a lot of fun to play and really had a good time with this one. I guess the big drawback is a lot of the environments, there's not a huge amount of variation. So despite all the different gameplay elements and the hybrid in the title, it can sometimes look a bit washed out, a little bit uninspiring, which actually makes it feel sometimes a bit repetitive. But if you're looking for something slightly different on the Nintendo 64, this may be one for you to try out. With its 4 controller ports, the N64 became the king of couch multiplayer gaming. Games like Mario Kart 64 and GoldenEye were mind-blowing back in the day. I'm surprised that Gauntlet Legends didn't actually have more of a following as a cooperative couch co-op fantasy RPG game. The more players you have here, the more fun this game becomes. And it ran really smoothly. It had a huge amount of spells, weapons, character types, and the action on screen at sometimes gets pretty crazy. And actually the performance on the N64 version holds up extremely well. So if you've missed this one, I definitely recommend, especially with friends, you check this one out. Gauntlet Legends is at number 11. Mystical Ninja 2, as it was known in Europe, is a big departure from the first game in that it's a side-scrolling platformer. Now, back in the 90s, with 3D being the shiny new thing, even this pseudo 3D 2.5D look didn't appeal to many people, so I think a lot of people overlooked this game, and that is a big mistake, because Mystical Ninja 2 is a huge amount of fun and a great side-scrolling platformer, so definitely one that you should definitely try out if you haven't. So we talked about the world's most famous duck being a game that people could potentially have missed, but when you talk about Mickey and the entire crew in a game made by Rare and people missing it, that seems crazy. However, Mickey's Speedway USA came out very late in the N64 life cycle, and it came out a couple of years after Diddy Kong Racing and of course Mario Kart 64. So I think so many people just basically dismiss this as another kart racing game, and I think if you do that at your peril, because it's a huge amount of fun. It uses that expansion pack and pushes the N64 hardware to the max. I think of this as almost like a huge giant expansion to Diddy Kong and Mario Kart 64 blended into one. So if you missed this and you love karting games, definitely check this one out. NBA Jam was a cultural phenomenon in the 90s, and NBA Hangtime was the next iteration in the series, following on from the SNES and Mega Drive classics. Now, this one was overlooked because, to be honest, it didn't up the bar that much from the Mega Drive game. That being said, the game is still amazing. NBA Hangtime is arcade perfect, so essentially it's NBA Jam with better animations, better visuals, smoother visuals, more teams. Everything is just fantastic, and it's still a joy to play. The gameplay holds up to this day. So if you're looking for a game that's better than those Mega Drive and SNES originals, you should definitely check out NBA Hangtime. Number 7 is Winback, and I think people always knew this was a good game, but it came out reasonably late in the N64's life cycle, when the PlayStation 2 and Dreamcast were knocking around, and I think a lot of people just didn't have time for this one. And that's a real shame, because this game actually has so many elements that were borrowed from the future. When you look at like the cover system, which you saw in Metal Gear Solid 2 and Gears of War, and of course the laser shot focus, which you saw in Resident Evil 4, classic games that Winback did first. Now the game came out on the N64 and the PlayStation 2. The N64 version for me is actually a more fun game. I've played this one a lot, and if you missed this one, you should definitely go back and take a look at Winback. For some reason, with glossy new 3D visuals around, 2D games just weren't well regarded. People didn't want them. They wanted the latest glowing technology. And again, that's a real shame, and it's a reason why a lot of people missed Treasure's brilliant Mischief Makers. The game is a side-scrolling 2D platformer where you cause utter chaos on the screen. If you've ever played Gunstar Heroes, you'll feel just right at home with the feel, even though the game is not the same. So Mischief Makers, if you missed it, definitely give it a go. It's a great game at number 6. So into the top 5, and Robotron 64 is the sequel to Robotron, and the whole game has just been given a new fresh lick of paint. The concept is still very basic. You can see it here: single screen, 2-stick, twin shooter, and I think that's why a lot of people just didn't really pick this one up. However, again, looking back now, this game on the N64, due to its simple graphics and addictive gameplay, has really stood the test of time. So I recommend everybody gives this one a try. It's hard to imagine a Lego game nowadays that isn't popular with the Traveller's Tales series around. But Lego Racers, system that had so many kart races, and at a time when Lego games didn't have that popularity, I think was a game that many people missed, and that's a true shame. The customizable karts in particular were the star of the show here, but there was also fantastic sound design, completely addictive sound that will ring around in your head. The gameplay was a lot of fun. It was challenging, but it felt fair. They really nailed the design and the Lego aesthetic on the Nintendo 64. So number 4 is Lego Racers. Bomberman Hero is actually the only game on this list that I originally owned back in 1999. The game is simple. It's the follow-up to Bomberman 64, and I didn't even look at Bomberman 64 because Saturn Bomberman was so good, and Bomberman 64 felt like a letdown. However, I picked Bomberman Hero up on a whim, secondhand, and actually, despite the simplicity of the graphics, it's actually a charming, really fun, engaging platformer. Loads of levels, you have to think about it. I had so much fun playing this and ended up completing the game and have fond memories to this day, but it's not a game many people talk about, so Bomberman Hero is my number 3. If I told you that there was a game that was basically a cross between Sega's Virtual On mech fighting game and kind of Pokemon RPG real world elements, why this game wasn't a global phenomenon, I don't know. Custom Robo was only released in Japan and didn't get a release on these shores until the GameCube follow-up. And that's a huge shame because the game is brilliant. Thankfully, it's been translated by a very talented group who have done a full English translation that we can now play today, and I highly recommend that everybody does. Custom Robo is at number 2. So the top spot in this list goes to Rocket Robot on Wheels. Now, games like Banjo-Kazooie, Mario 64, Donkey Kong 64, Rayman 2, the N64 had so many fantastic platformers, but a little gem came out right at the end of the console's life cycle. I missed it back in the day. And you know what? When you play this game now and compare it to those titles, this isn't a second-rate, oh, give this one a go if you want more platforming. This title holds up by itself. It's a lot of fun. It's really engaging. The visuals look really good. They've thought through the levels. It's not just a collectathon. You know, you can do all sorts of different tasks and all sorts of branching out worlds, etc. It's a huge amount of fun, and if you like classic Nintendo style platformers, this is definitely one that you should try. I hope you enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed making this one. Like and subscribe as always, and have a great day.